Hey guys, coming here with another What's Next. This is on former 2-division world champion Danny Garcia, my number 6 welterweight in the world right now. Danny hasn't fought since January when he scored a one-sided 12-round unanimous decision over a tough and game Ivan Redkach. Danny just hit him with some clean shots, but Redkach wasn't going anywhere. He wouldn't go down. He wouldn't get knocked out. Not Danny's best performance, but Danny, I think he was probably overlooking, expecting an early knockout, and it just never came. But it was a dominant performance, and, hopefully it leads to something bigger. Now, Danny is ranked highly by every governing body. He's number 1 in the WBO. He's number 2 in the WBA and the WBC, and he's also I believe he's number 3 in the IBF. So a lot of high rankings for Danny right now. So let's take a look at what's next for Danny Garcia, one of the best fighters in boxing. And he's in the best division. So let's run through the top 10. We start with number 1, the undefeated unified champion, Errol Spence Jr. Now, I love this matchup, and I think this fight, definitely could happen next. It was a fight that was talked about for January or March, but the pandemic happened, and then Errol Spence also wasn't ready because of that bad car accident he was in last year. So Spence is looking at a fall return. Now, is he going to want to come back against Danny, though? That's the big question. Is he going to be ready for a guy like Danny Garcia in his first fight out? I know he's talking about facing Manny Pacquiao. I think he's almost feeling the pressure of having to face a guy like Danny next, because if he doesn't and he takes a stay busy fight, then he's going to have to follow that up with a mandatory to hold on to his IBF title, likely against Sergey Lipinets. Not a big name. Lipinets, a tough guy, but he's not a big name. So that would be back-to-back fights against just kind of guys that aren't on his level. So I think he's kind of feeling the pressure to take a big fight next. Danny Garcia could be that. To be honest, I'm leaning towards that direction simply because I think Manny Pacquiao, who's basically got first dibs, is going to choose Mikey Garcia. Once those two guys are off the table, Spence, there's no bigger fight out there outside of Terrence Crawford, which we already know is not going to happen till the earliest 2021. So why not go after Danny Garcia next? I mean, I think Spence, he's a beatable opponent. He's a tough opponent. And I just think Spence is maybe not confident that it would be the kind of performance that he wants it to be, because he's coming out of that car accident. It'd be his first fight back, likely about a year off in between fights. So does he want to take that risk? Again, I'm leaning towards the yes, that I think that's what's going to happen, but it's not 100%. So hopefully Danny can land that fight, because Danny would definitely be ready for it. So we'll see. Next to number 2, undefeated WBO champion, Terrence Crawford. Why Danny doesn't just fucking sign on the dotted line for a Crawford fight is beyond me. He would make more money against Terrence Crawford than he would against Errol Spence, and maybe even against Manny Pacquiao. Bob Arum offered him $5 million last year to come over to ESPN and fight Terrence Crawford. It'd be a huge fight. You know why I think Danny doesn't want to fight him? Because I think Danny knows he has no chance of fucking beating Terrence Crawford. But he's number 1 in the WBO according to now. Now, WBO is going to redo their rankings in June. Maybe Danny's not number 1 anymore, but God damn it, why won't he fight Terrence Crawford? It's a great fight. The only thing I can make out is that he's afraid of getting his ass whipped. And, unless he's in line for Pacquiao. If he gets the Pacquiao fight, I understand. There's more recognition, maybe around the same amount of money, because Danny is a big name. Then by all means, go after Manny. That's a more historic fight. Right now, it's for a world title. So just like it would be against Crawford. But if you can't land Manny, why not fucking face, Crawford if Spence isn't available? But if Spence is available now, I guess that's at least the same kind of fight. But I just don't think he's going to get as much money for Spence as he would for Crawford. But I really don't understand why Danny hasn't already signed on to face Bud But I guess it's because there's so many good fighters in the PBC that they want their guys to fight each other. So I guess from that standpoint, I understand. But, you know, I just think it's a great matchup, and it's a fight that should be made. And if these guys are asked out in terms of the Pacquiaos and the other, you know, because Thurman and Porter, likely not options, why not fight each other? To me, it's beyond me, but whatever. Next at number 3, Manny Pacquiao. Danny made great points this past week when he came out and said that a fight between him and Pacquiao makes more sense than a fight with anybody else that's on Pacquiao's radar. I agree to an extent. I think on paper, Errol Spence is the bigger fight, but Danny might have the bigger name in terms of known, you know, fighters to the public. So Danny might be right from that standpoint. Danny's bigger name. Now, he doesn't bring the titles to the table, but in my opinion, he's also less risk of beating Pacquiao than Spence is. But then there's Mikey Garcia. But I mean, I think Danny is a tougher, better challenge for Manny, and about the same amount of risk factor, because Danny, in my opinion, is a little slower but punches harder. But Mikey is faster, maybe doesn't punch as hard, but he's got the better boxing ability and is quicker. So I think it's kind of a pick your poison, but I mean, I don't know why. I think Pacquiao's a great matchup for Danny, and I do think he's in the running, but I don't think he's going to get the fight next. I honestly think that's going to, what's his name, Mikey, but, you know, he is in the running, and I do think it could happen. Number 4 is a rematch with Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman is saying he'd welcome a rematch with Danny, but I just don't think he's going to do that next. I don't think Thurman, coming off of the Pacquiao loss last year, by the time he comes back when the coronavirus pandemic's lifted, it's going to be over a year off. Could be close to a year and a half at that point, and because he might not be back till towards the end of the year. And, you know, I don't think he'd want to go straight in to a rematch against Danny. So he said he'd be willing to fight him again, but I don't think Thurman's going to fight Danny next. So it could happen, but I don't think it's going to happen. Now, number 5 is a rematch with former world champion Sean Porter. You know, I would love to see the fight, but I think Danny learned in the first fight, unless there's a world title on the line between these two, because that's the way he played it the first time, it wouldn't make sense to go after Porter. If both these guys are asked out, you know, in the running for the big fights, maybe, you know, but I really don't see Danny signing on to face Porter next. You know, he got beat. It was a close, very good fight. He got beat the first time around, but why take the risk of getting beat again against Porter, who's not as big of a name, and there's no title on the line? So I think Danny, I don't see him facing Porter next. Danny's number 6. Number 7 is your Dennis Ugas. Danny could probably get the fight if he wanted it, but it wouldn't make sense. Ugas isn't a big name. He's got that awkward style. He is with the PBC. It's a makeable fight, but I don't see Danny going this route. Number 8 is Mikey Garcia. This is a fight that almost happened last year. It definitely would be an option, but I don't think it's going to happen, but I think it could happen if Pacquiao decides to take Errol Spence over the 2 Garcias. If he chooses the Spence unification bout, which is possible, then I think Mikey looks right at Danny, and those 2 guys make the fight. I still believe Pacquiao's choosing Mikey, but I do think he could face Spence. He could very possibly face Spence in the fall. And like I said, that leaves Mikey and Danny wide open for each other. So this fight is possible. Mikey was number 8. Number 9 now, we have Sergey Lipinets. Lipinets has an interim title fight coming up next. So he's going to go with that to try to get in line for the IBF champion early next year. Now the 3-way tie for 10th. First up, Jesse Vargas. Throw this fight out. Vargas just lost to Mikey. Danny's not going to look at a guy that is a risk to him like Jesse Vargas. You know, so, and it's Matchroom working with PBC. I don't see him coming together for it. Next is Josecito Lopez. Now, if Danny gets asked out and doesn't want to go on and face Crawford or rematch Porter, then I think a fight with Lopez makes sense, because Lopez is a good-sized name. He really fought well against Keith Thurman last year, got a knockout over John Molina Jr. So I think the fight has an outside chance of happening if Danny doesn't get one of the big fights that he wants. And then finally, Thomas Delorme. Not going to happen next. Delorme is facing Jamal James. I think he's going to lose, but even if he were to win, that's what he has coming up next, most likely. So I don't think Danny, unless Danny pushed for the fight next, and he's not going to because he wants to go after the bigger names. So I don't see it. So what do I think Danny's going to do next? Personally, I think he wants one of the big dogs. That's what he wants. Obviously, he wants the Pacquiao fight first. Personally, I don't think he's going to get it. If I had to predict, I'd say Mikey's going to get the Pacquiao fight. And then I think Danny focuses on a showdown with Errol Spence. But he might not get that either. If he doesn't get that, I think if he wants the big fight, it's Terrence Crawford should be next or Sean Porter, the rematch. But is Danny going to go after that if he doesn't get the two big fights that he wants? And anything can happen. Anything could change. Again, Pacquiao could choose him. Pacquiao could choose to face Spence. And then I think Danny goes after Mikey Garcia. So a lot of moving pieces in the welterweight division. We got to see what Manny Pacquiao decides to do first. And then that'll line up for a guy like Danny Garcia. That's what's next on Danny Garcia, my number 6 welterweight in the world right now. I hope you enjoyed it. True Boxing, you've been hit with the truth.